Hello, I'm Dan Goodine, and today we're going to be talking about placing the crankshaft damper bolt on a 2001 Dodge Viper RT10. This particular car has just over 40-some thousand miles. Fairly typical for these motors. The crankshaft damper bolt comes loose, and then the damper itself comes off. Causes all kinds of problems, power steering going out, overheating, you name it. Basically the belt isn't going around as it should anymore. So we're going to put this in the air, we're going to take a look at what happened and damage caused by it and repair it as best as possible. So stick around. Alright, first off, let's talk about a couple things on the table here. Some stuff we're going to use for this job. First off would be the culprit. In this box here is the bolt. This is a brand new bolt. This is a genuine Chrysler product. Get the label there for you. This bolt can be bought for as cheap as $11. I've seen them all the way up to $22, $23. Your Dodge dealer could generally get it for you for about $15. Otherwise, plenty of places online will sell them also. So this is what happens. This bolt loosens up, and then the balancer comes loose. So new one of these recommended every time for this job. Definitely the red Loctite to go on these threads as well. That bolt goes inside of this. This is the balancer itself. I have a new balancer here. The reason I have a new balancer is because oftentimes when this comes off, the crankshaft will rattle around in here a ton, causing all kinds of damage, all kinds of play, and essentially if this thing isn't balanced right, it's not doing its job, and it can cause damage to the engine and other components. So $140, $45 I believe is what I paid for this. This is another genuine Chrysler product. Dealership will get it to for around $200. I've heard of $250, but that's pretty crazy. So shop around, 130, 40 bucks. You should be able to find a brand new one. While doing this, even though this isn't a terribly difficult job, this isn't something you want to do often or ever again. So I would recommend ROE Racing. They have a product to pin this onto the crankshaft. Basically what you're going to be doing is taking this drill guide block, bolting it onto the damper. There are 2 drill holes and a supplied drill bit to drill the appropriate holes and to pound in these roll pins. Some heavy duty roll pins, essentially connecting this unit to the crankshaft in addition to the new bolt and the red Loctite. You're also going to need a torque wrench that can go up to 250 foot-pounds. A lot of torque on that. The size socket is 1.25 inches. Couple other things. The belt, definitely replace the belt. When this gets loose and the pulley that's attached to this belt slips a bunch, and it can get damaged. While you're doing this, you have the belt off anyway. Put a new belt on. This particular one was only $15. You can spend all kinds of money on a belt, anywhere from $10, $12 to I've seen belts over $100. If you're not pushing, 1,000 horsepower or some crazy amount of horsepower out of this car, just go with a decent belt and replace it every couple of years. You really should. Some other items. This seal here. What is this and what are we doing with it? It's another genuine part. There's the part number. This seal is behind this damper on the engine, just like that. This is for the front timing cover. It's also called the front engine seal. And sometimes when these loosen up, they can damage this, or other times, depending on how many miles the vehicle has, this seal's just worn out. And since this is buried behind this thing, which we're Loctiting, torquing to 250, and pinning it, you don't want to have to come back and replace this seal 6 months, 2 years, whatever it is. So take the time now and just put the new seal in. This puppy is a little bit expensive, about $45 I paid for this seal. To get the seal out, you actually need a special removal tool. I've seen some guys do it without the tool with mixed results. I would recommend the tool. It is a Miller C4679 Alpha. Basically what this tool does is it screws into the old seal over the top of the crankshaft, tightens on it, and then you take this jam bolt and it pulls it back off of it. Pretty useful, pretty handy tool. You can get those for $35 to $55. There's also an installation tool for this. However, the installation tool is really just a glorified socket that you hammer on. I'll tell you later on the socket that I use for this when I get it out. That tool is also $40, $50. I would recommend just using a socket, but being gentle. Also, since we're replacing an oil seal, that means we get to drain the oil. So that's the 10W30 Mobile 1 full synthetic that the manual recommends. You can debate oil all day long. Yes, all oil pretty much is oil if it meets the API and the ratings for that specific use. We're just going with what's recommended for this vehicle. All right, we have the car up in the air and we're looking at the problem right here. This is the balancer and the pulley, and this is the bolt. That's the bolt that gives all the trouble, comes loose. You can see the belt here is off as well, and some visible signs of damage. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that bolt out the rest of the way. Again, I use this swivel ratchet and 1.25 inches from the bottom here. It's pretty easy to get at. There's just a couple threads left on it. I'll take that out right now. It was pretty tough going for a bunch of the threads because they're really messed up. There's a lot of damage to this bolt, so it's a good thing we have a replacement for it. The balancer is loose, comes right off. We can see from behind that the balancer has a lot of scarring on the inside, a lot of wear, so definitely a good thing we have another one of those to put on. As you can see on the crankshaft, there's also some damage from the balancer coming loose. Not typically a problem. They can get really bad, but this one's not that. So as long as you didn't drive the car for too long, you should be alright. Next, I'm going to remove this pulley from the balancer. And to do that, I'm going to take out these bolts right along here. That'll make the two separate and easier to pull out from below. To remove this pulley from the balancer, I'm using a 1/2 inch socket with a wobble extension. Just makes it a little easier to get in and out of here. Also the cordless tool. To separate these two, I just use 2 pry bars in opposite direction. Comes apart relatively easy. Don't drop it. There are some lines back here that are sensitive. This pulley comes out the front the easiest. And to clean this all off, make it nice. We're going to reuse this part, so make sure to inspect the grooves for any damage. Now that we have it off, you can see more clearly the crankshaft What I'm going to do is I'm going to stick a bore scope in there and take a look at the threads just to make sure that everything looks okay. Okay, here we are. You can clearly see the threads inside of the crankshaft, and they look in pretty good shape. So we got lucky there. Also using the bore scope to check the oil seal around the crankshaft, there is some small damage and I can see some oil coming out of it. I also wiped off some oil when I took off the balancer. So definitely a good idea to have that seal and tool on hand and to replace it at this time. And you feel that it's not smooth and there are some burrs. What I like to do is take some emery cloth such as this, put it around it, and do some light sanding. You can also take the wheels, rotate them to rotate the crankshaft if the car's in gear, and then get the other side of it as well. So I'm going to do that real quick. With the car in gear, I've rotated the rear wheels both at the same time, and this is changed the position of the crankshaft so I can sand the other side a little better. You don't want to overdo this at all. Just little bits, then check it. Make sure to clean off any of your sanding. Okay, now to remove the oil seal. Put the Miller tool seal remover up in there, make sure that the bolt is spun out. And start by hand tightening. Alright, once you have that hand tight, go ahead and take a 1-inch wrench, or I like to use a smaller adjustable because of the size. Get in there and give it a couple more turns, just to make sure that you're really biting on that seal before we go and try to yank it out. Alright, once that's done, go ahead and twist this bolt in. That's going to send it down into that hole in the crankshaft and pop that seal right out of there. Put a 3/4 on there. Just about out of thread. There we go. Just broke free. There. Twist and turn as you pull that out. You can see the removal tool really kills that seal. That's what its job is though. What we have to do now is inspect the shaft and the seal mating surfaces on the timing cover and then install our new seal. So after removing that seal, that's a great time for you to find out if you already drained the oil or if you forgot that step. Here's the new seal. It's to be installed with the flat side facing out. Don't mess with the grease that's in there, that's going to go around the crankshaft. Installing the seal, I first slide it over the crankshaft and up to the housing. And then I'm going to use this short 1 3/8 socket. Gives me the room I need under here. Make sure you push this in straight. You don't want one side going in more than the other. Once the seal is installed, and you check to make sure that it's even with the face of the cover all the way around, especially on the top area, then you're ready to move on to the next step, and that would be mounting the balancer. Okay, to mount the balancer, simply slide it up into the hole the same way you took it off. I like to use a longer 3/4 fine thread bolt to get it started with a nice big washer on there. Basically what that's going to do is it's going to line me up real good. If you have any imperfections on the crankshaft, this is going to help you slide it on. At this point, we're not Loctiting anything, we're not tightening it to torque. All we're doing is setting this balancer all the way onto the crankshaft. Then we're going to remove this bolt, place on our drill guide, drill our holes, and pin the balancer to the crankshaft. If the threads inside of the hole need cleaning up at all, you can always run through a 3/4 by 16 tap. And make sure you blow that hole out, get all those shavings out of there before you put your new bolt in. It's time to put on the ROE Racing pinning kit. And what this kit is these components here. You have the guide block, the bolts to secure the guide block, the drill bit, and the roll pins. What's going to happen here is this guide block, you're going to bolt it onto the balancer. You can see that it's milled out to fit that ridge right there on the balancer. You're going to bolt it on with these 2 bolts. They want you to do it in a vertical position and then rotate it and drill your holes. That's basically so you have the clearance to make those holes. So what this is going to do, this is on the other side. I'm showing you just from the back. When this gets mounted on here, like so, on the other side, when you're drilling, what you're doing is you're actually drilling through half of the balancer and half of the crankshaft. So if you were to take this off, you would then see on the back of the crankshaft 2 half circles completely opposed from each other on the other side. What that does is obviously keeps that from spinning. You also want to mark the drill bit 2.45 inches from the tip. What this is going to do is prevent you from drilling all the way through your balancer and into your brand new oil seal, or your old oil seal if you didn't replace it. Either way, bad situation. If you drill too shallow, then the pins won't go in all the way, and then you'll have to grind them off. Now that we have the drill guide block bolted in place on the balancer in roughly a 12 o'clock position, I'm going to use the drill bit that we have all taped off at the appropriate length and just a cheap Harbor Freight 90-degree drill. We're going to be able to get this up in over the top of the steering rack, drill the hole, and then rotate the crankshaft 180 degrees and drill the other hole. It was a lot easier and safer to get the drill into position without the airline. I also added an extra extension swivel to the airline so I had enough room up above. When drilling these holes, it can be very useful to take a pry bar and to push on the back of the drill to help give you some added pressure. Because of the awkward angle that you're doing these at, it gets very tiring trying to hold the drill in position. So I find using a pry bar and just giving it some gentle pressure really helps out. Once you've drilled both holes, remove the drill guide and blow out the holes with an air nozzle to remove any extra shards of metal that might obstruct the roll pin. You can see all the metal that just fell. The roll pins are to be installed with the open end, the seam, towards the center of the crankshaft. There are several ways to put these in. You can pound them in with a small hammer. You can also use an air chisel. A little bit more tricky to get it up in there. They go in pretty easy. Once the 2 roll pins are fully installed, either flush with the surface of the balancer or slightly below, it's time to install the bolt. Remember to put the red Loctite on and torque it to 250 foot-pounds. The next step is to attach the damper pulley. Do that by reinstalling the 6 bolts you took out earlier to separate the two. Once you've done that and tightened it down, I recommend taking a paint pen and making a mark on the bolt and on the pulley so future inspection can be made easily to make sure that the bolt is staying tight. When it comes to reinstalling the serpentine belt, refer to the manual for the proper routing. Keep in mind that there is different routing for air conditioning and without air conditioning. Once you've loosely fitted the belt and you're ready to lower the car or go topside to finish the belt installation, now is a good time to put the oil filter and the oil drain plug back in place. Always recommend putting a thin bead of oil around the oil seal on the filter and also a little bit on the threads inside. Spin the oil filter on and give it a good hand tight. Okay, so there you go. Just make sure that the serpentine belt is on all the pulleys all the way around, nice and centered. Top off the oil, 10 quarts, and fire it up. And what you're checking for, you want to make sure that your filter, your drain plug, and also that front oil seal, that nothing is leaking. Other than that, that's it. Job well done. Wasn't too hard, didn't take all day. Keep in mind, the only parts that I removed for this job are the oil filter drain plug and the damper balancer. Nothing else was taken off. Everything was done from underneath, from the front for the most part. No reason to take off air boxes or steering racks or anything like that. So just keep that in mind, and thanks for watching.